Paragliding is one of the most dangerous sports in the world. Almost everyone dreams to experience the free fall from an aeroplane in order to get an adventurous feeling. Although many times this once-in-a-lifetime experience proves out to be the worst. As in this video, we are going to tell you about Ewa Wisnierska, who experienced the most bone-chilling paragliding of human history. So without wasting any time, let's get started. On 17th of February 2007, German paragliding champion Ewa Wisnierska was standing with 200 fellow paragliders on Mount Borah in New South Wales, Australia. They were about to launch off as part of their training for next week's Paragliding World Championship. As the competitors were debriefed, however, there was a warning. As per the warning, some storm clouds had been sighted to the north, and as the day progressed, thunderstorm warnings got more severe. The paragliders had been cautioned, and Ewa set her GPS and tracking log. The clouds didn't look so bad at first glance. She prepared to take off, not expecting what would soon happen. Strapped into her glider, Ewa took a good run forward and launched herself into the air. On the ground, the rest of the German team followed in a van to track her progress, checking in with her via radio from time to time. As she headed north, the first part of Ewa's journey was quite calm. She followed the mountain ridge from Mount Borah for about 12 miles before it ended, and she entered the skies over the vast savanna. And that's exactly where she would be most at risk. As Ewa Wisnierska's GPS and tracking log ticked, tracking her progress, two thunderstorm clouds appeared in front of her, one larger than the other. She and her teammates had taken off roughly an hour after many other pilots, and they had passed far beyond the clouds. That left three paragliders directly en route towards the storm clouds. Ewa, an Austrian friend of hers, and a Chinese fellow paraglider who was an expert in his field for a decade. The three of them were fairly confident that they could dodge the menacing clouds, but now they were isolated. Many other paragliders behind and around Ewa Wisnierska and her two colleagues were put off by the clouds. They identified the risk and decided to call it quits. They decided then and there that it would be better to land than to risk navigating through the storm. Ewa was gliding and trying to avoid the clouds at the same time. She knew that if she flew under them, she could get sucked up, so she tried to steer around, and that's when the unthinkable happened. In a matter of moments, the weather changed with a snap. The smaller cloud was suddenly engulfed and swallowed by the larger one, merging into a tremendous cumulonimbus cloud looming over the plains. It was now a massive storm 12 miles across. A few moments later, her Austrian friend somehow managed to escape, and she also landed on a farmhouse nearby. Although after landing, he looked upwards and realized that Ewa was in huge trouble now. Inside the cumulonimbus cloud, Ewa was strapped into her paraglider, hurtling upward like a rocket. The storm was lifting her at a tremendous rate of 60 feet per second, and she was completely and utterly powerless to break out of the wind tunnel. Ewa knew she was heading towards the storm's eye in its vicious center because she could hear immense claps of thunder coming from all around her. She prayed to be thrown out of the cloud as she grasped her glider straps. However, her vision had become dangerously impaired due to her surroundings. Ewa could no longer see anything. All around her, it was pitch black except for constant flashes of lightning, dangerously close to electrocuting her even as she ascended. She could only guess what was happening around her through the colossal rip of the blinding winds. As Ewa continued to be sucked up by the storm in its angry cloak of darkness, it became freezing cold. She was gaining altitude at an unbelievable rate and began shivering uncontrollably. There was nothing she could possibly do to stop the glider from rising. Huge hailballs the size of oranges painfully pelted her left and right, filling her harness and weighing her down. But trying to fall out of the storm was not an option. Her instruments were soaked and her death was horribly inevitable. Thousands of feet in the sky, Ewa blacked out. She floated, unconscious in her harness, passed out from lack of oxygen. By this point, the storm system had brought her all the way to the top of the cumulonimbus cloud, and there she drifted, suspended in the heavens. The temperature at her altitude was negative 50 degrees Celsius. Though she had dressed warmly, her clothing was in no way suitable for such temperatures. Everything, her face, her gloves, and the wings of her glider all became encased in ice, and she had no breathing apparatus. Unconscious and starved of oxygen, her body was freezing over. Each minute that passed increased the chance that Ewa would die there at the limit of the stratosphere. Yet there she remained, strapped into her glider, suspended miles above the earth. If she was going to live, it was highly likely that she would suffer permanent brain or organ damage, or both. Peacefully, aimlessly gliding high above the wrath of the storm, she lingered there for at least 40 minutes, unaware of how much time had passed. Then suddenly, something snapped. The wing of Ewa's paraglider gave way from the weight of the ice that had collected on it. She began to plummet from the heavens in a terrifying freefall. She was still unconscious, not realizing she was falling. Ewa's paraglider shot down towards the heart of the storm, traveling at 90 feet every second, far faster than the ascent had been. There was no way for her to save herself. If she continued falling like this, she would be crushed upon impact with the ground. Suddenly, after Ewa had been free falling almost 2 miles, something miraculous happened. Her glider suddenly opened up entirely by itself and its wings straightened back out. As it unfurled, it steadied her fall and the abrupt jerk woke her up. As she gradually regained consciousness, she observed her surroundings and noticed that she was still caught in the snares of the thunderstorm. Her mind started to reanimate, but she could barely move her joints. Now gliding once again, Ewa was neither falling nor being sucked skyward, but she was still in terrible danger and had to get out of the storm clouds. Lightning and hail continued to erupt all around her. To make matters worse, the brakes slipped out of her hands and her gloves were frozen solid. Meanwhile, on the ground near the Australian town of Manila, panic was spreading. The German paragliding team was driving around, frantically searching for their friend Ewa Wisnierska. The problem was they had no clue whatsoever as to where she could be or where she would land. Somehow amid the catastrophe, Ewa managed to slowly reach out her limp hands and grasp the handles and brakes on her glider. Though she was numb from the cold and barely able to think, let alone manipulate the glider, she maneuvered just enough to steady its course. She finally received a glance of land after being in the darkness for the last few hours. Just seeing land was an indescribable joy for her. The Australian plains stretched out underneath her. It gave her hope that she might live. Ewa Wisnierska's instincts kicked in as she steered herself downwards. She crash-landed her glider into an open field about 1,500 feet from a farmhouse. At that moment, she knew in her heart one thing: she was going to live, but she was far from being in the clear. She was trying to warm up her body as she was lying hopelessly there, and all of a sudden, her phone rang miraculously, giving her a ray of hope. Somehow her teammates found her out alive, and they saw that her body temperature was dangerously low. She was too weak to even walk to the farm. She was so seriously shivering that it was a matter of problem whether she would be able to survive after medication or not. But probably God wanted her to live, and she came out alive and fine out of the hospital at last after a few days. In this edge-of-the-sea journey, Ewa Wisnierska had survived extraordinary altitudes, a long period of time unconscious, oxygen deprivation, lightning, exposure to extreme cold, and ferocious winds. Yet at the hospital, the doctors finally told Ewa and her teammates something incredible: that she was more or less fine and free to go. After inspection of her GPS, it was found out that she had actually been taken up into the air to a maximum height of 32,634 feet. And for your information, no human being on Earth had ever been at those altitudes unprotected and survived to tell the tale, which makes it a record itself. However, their Chinese fellow teammate was unable to escape this tremendous calamity and hence died out before even reaching the team. This story of Ewa Wisnierska is still an inspiration to countless paragliders out there. Well, are you one of them too? If yes, then let me know in the comments down below.